Welcome to the Guilderland Central School District Board of Ed meeting on May 23rd, 2023. Please silence your cell phones and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item on the agenda this evening is the showcase of students. So we have the Dutchman Robotics team here. Ready?
Well, we get to welcome Mr. Corbett and the Dutchman Robotics team, fresh from Texas, where they competed in the national competitions. Mr. Corbett, do you want to tell us what we're seeing?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Max Corbett. It's my second year here at the high school. I taught at Farnsworth for 7 years before that. This year and last year I've run the Dutchman Robotics Challenge. So every year there's a different challenge put out. It's a worldwide competition. The students need to use the VEX parts. Why don't you guys come stand over here? And they have to build a robot, program a robot, design a robot that meets a certain number of challenges. This year the challenge was they had to pick up these foam discs. They had to figure out how to launch them into a Frisbee golf tournament. They had to go around and there were game pieces they had to spin to show their color. And then at the end you have to expand as big as you can. It covers many tiles, and each floor tile you cover you get extra points. There's a 15-second autonomous period, so the students program it to drive by itself for the first 15 seconds. And then there's a minute 45 of driver control. There's 4 teams that compete at a time, so you're in an alliance with another team. It might be you're with Lake George. And then next competition, you are now against Lake George. And then towards the end of the competition, the teams pick who their final alliance will be, so they have to work with different teams. So we're going to demonstrate some of the things that the robot has done. They've been working on it since September, and the students will tell some of the things that they did as well.
So to start, we'd like to introduce ourselves. So I'm Autry, I'm the team captain, and I'm one of the programmers.
I'm Ethan. I am one of the builders. I'm Ethan. I'm one of the builders on the team.
I'm Josh, and I'm the primary programmer for the team.
I'm Evan. I'm the driver for our team.
I'm Austin, and I'm the notebook manager for the team.
And I'm Isaiah. I'm the designer for our team.
So to start, we'd like to quickly demonstrate the capabilities of the robot. So to drive, we have 2 motors in the back. In the front, we have these special Omni wheels, which, as you can see, have these bits on here that let you drive to side to side. So as Vaughn shows, these make it easier to turn around. As Mr. Corbett mentioned before, these foam discs are the primary objects of the game. So we are able to pick these discs up and also throw them. And this is at a reduced speed, but we can actually throw them quite far. Put it that way.
Careful. Oh, awesome.
We also have these 3 wheels in the back that are rollers. These are also used to play the game. And again, as Mr. Corbett mentioned, the final goal of the game is to cover as much area as possible using these string launchers that you see on top of the robot. Put it that way. And next, Isaiah, the main designer, is going to talk about the design process and all the challenges that we had to overcome.
Thank you, Autry. We've been designing our robot since the beginning of the year. A lot of the stuff we see now hasn't been there when we first competed in the regional tournament. Things like the expansion mechanism, we only added after states. And we've been working on this with our experience that we got from freshman year, and we're now in our second year, and most of us are going to do it next year too. And we'd love to have some funding to get this better. And I'll move on to Austin.
We recorded what we did from the first year to this end out till the competition. This what we recorded throughout the year about how we made the robot and how our challenges and how we solved the problems.
One thing that we'd all like to add is how we overcame certain challenges. So due to supply and monetary constraints, we weren't able to buy a lot of the parts that we wanted. such as something called pneumatics, which is essentially little pistons that are powered by air. And we had to come up with creative solutions. So as you saw, that little string launcher expansion mechanism, we had to think of a creative way to use it, to create it using the materials that we did have. And it's through these constraints that we experience that we learn how to create new and creative design solutions that can still achieve our goal despite having limitations.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm the primary programmer, and I would like to talk to you about the programming. So, first off, I realized as a programmer that we had to overcome many challenges, such as being able to code the driver controls for Vivon, and me and Vivon have had to collaborate together to be able to see what works the best for him and what code we can use to make him most comfortable while driving. Mr. Corbett also mentioned the autonomous mode earlier, which is a short 15-second period at the start of every game where the driver has to move on, or the robot has to move by itself. And I also coded that, and we've been able to launch a few discs into the high goal, or the frisbee goal that Mr. Corbett mentioned earlier. And overall, I'm just really proud of what this team has accomplished, and I'm excited to compete next year.
So as a programmer, like Josh, we are given the tools needed to build the robot. So the Vex Robotics company creates software that we can use to program the robot, and we use that brain that he's holding right now. It's essentially a little computer that you can see in the middle of our robot that we use to program it. And the thing is, because we're given the tools to solve the problem, but not the solution ourselves, we're forced to think creatively to learn how to solve it ourselves. And again, we all grow as we learn by doing. And of course, as a team, it's not just the programmers who are learning. And Vivon, our driver, he's going to talk about how, as a team, we all learn collaboration skills through the competitions that we see at the end of the season.
So we talked about strategies before we going in the competition games with other teams and alliances. So we know what our primary task is, and we're sure what we have to do during the game. Yeah.
Now obviously we went to Worlds, right? And that was in Dallas. We stayed there for 5 days. We went from Monday to Friday. We had a great time. There was a lot of teams there. There was over 800 teams there, from all over the world, and a lot of people came there. We had an opportunity to meet and talk with a lot of teams. We were able to stay inside a hotel and just be able to work on our robot, have our robot go to Worlds, and enjoy this giant venue that we were able to go to, where all these teams were being hosted. So, yeah, and we talked to countries like China. We had different countries like Armenia. What was it, Armenia? South Korea, and Taiwan, England. And there was definitely a lot of teams that were from all over the world over there, and it was really a great experience. So, yep.
Is that it?
Yeah. One thing that we didn't add earlier is how we learn through these competitions. So as Vivon mentioned, strategy is a very important part of the game. However, we don't actually learn who we're with and who we're against until right before the competition. So again, this is an important learning experience for us because it teaches us how to adapt to these to this situation in a really short amount of time. And it teaches us a lot of important skills that we're going to need to use in the real world, such as learning how to collaborate with others who may have different strengths and weaknesses compared to us.
So I just wanted to mention that we competed in Syracuse and Liverpool, and then we competed in Queensbury, and we went to Queensbury. 4 of our teams out of the 6 qualified for the state championship, and we went there, and then this team qualified for the world championship, so we got an invite to go down there. And we found out March 11th, so it was like we had a month and a half to schedule. How do you get 6 people down to Texas for a week? So I want to thank Ms. Anderson. She helped out tremendously with getting the ball rolling and how things were going to go, and Dr. Wiles for doing the approval process to make all that happen. All right, anybody have any questions? Overall, it was a world stage. We did as expected. In the end, there were 10 divisions. They took the 800 teams and divided it by 10, and we placed 50th or 60th out of 80. Some of the robots during the 15-second autonomous would launch 8 discs into a goal, and then by the end they would have 40 stacked in there, and we would average like 10. So in the northern New York region, we did really well, but once you put us on the world stage, we're like, whoa. So it was humbling, but we learned a tremendous amount for next year. So, is that it, guys? So thank you.
Great job. It's awesome. That's Mr. Corbett, right? They came last year, so I remember.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for your hard work too.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for coming out. It's great to see the robots every year. So our next item on the agenda this evening is public comment. We have at least one in person. So I'd like to invite Mike Dempsey from the Gittleton Fire Chiefs Association.
Thank you.
Evening.
So good evening, my esteemed members of the school board. My name is Mike Dempsey. I have the privilege to speak before you on behalf of the Town of Gittleton Fire Chiefs and Commissioners Association. It's a group of past chiefs, current chiefs of all the fire departments that your residents are a part of. All right. So I'm here to discuss an important matter that not only affects our local heroes, but also embodies the spirit of gratitude and support for those who selflessly protect our lives and the properties, which is that volunteer firefighter tax exemption, which is on your agenda later today. As you may know, the volunteer firefighters play an invaluable role in safeguarding our community. They willingly put their lives on the line, dedicate countless hours to training, responding to emergencies, and ensuring our safety. These brave men and women, of which some are here, must undergo extensive training, certifications to effectively handle a wide range of emergencies they face, not just the structure fires. From initial firefighting courses to specialized training in hazardous materials, technical rescues, EMS, volunteer firefighters invest their time, energy to become skilled professionals. They continually update their knowledge and skills, attending training sessions, which are typically held weekly, as well as workshops, which last months at a time, to keep up with the latest techniques and the best practices. It is essential to recognize the significant commitment our volunteer firefighters make to ensure that they are ready and capable of protecting our community. They spend countless hours away from their families, their jobs, and their personal lives to undergo the training and to attend the emergencies. This dedication does not only demonstrate their passion for the fire service, but also ensures that our community has a well-prepared and highly skilled volunteer fire service. By moving forward with the resolution to provide a 10% reduction in school taxes for our volunteer firefighters, the Gittleton School Board will show an immense commitment and would acknowledge the immense commitment and sacrifices these individuals make to keep our community safe. It would be a profound statement of appreciation for their selflessness and dedication. Furthermore, a robust volunteer fire service is crucial to maintaining a balanced and sustainable approach to public safety in our town. Without the dedication of the volunteer firefighters, the cost of transitioning to a fully paid fire service would be astronomical and would undoubtedly result in skyrocketing taxes for all of our residents. Volunteer firefighters bring a unique blend of local knowledge, passion, and a genuine connection to our community. They understand the intricacies of our neighborhoods, know the quickest routes to the emergencies, and are intimately familiar with the challenges specific to Gittleton. Their commitment to service helps to keep the cost of fire protection manageable, allowing us to allocate resources more effectively and efficiently. Implementing the volunteer firefighter tax exemption would not only recognize the sacrifices that our volunteers make, but also reinforces the symbolic relationship between our educational institutions and the fire service. It sends the message that Gittleton values the dedication, skill, and professionalism of our volunteer firefighters and stands united in supporting them. I urge you, the members of the school board, to consider the positive impact that this resolution would have on our volunteer firefighters and the message that it sends to our community about the commitment you see in us. Together, let's honor their sacrifice, recognize their commitment, and show our deep appreciation for all of them. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to read the other two comments, and then I'm going to possibly move it up. Are there any other in-person comments? Okay. So we have 3 public comments that we received. I'm going to go ahead and read. First one, to the Board of Education, the Guilderland Girls, this is why I brought these. The Guilderland Girls Outdoor Track Team received an email from a coach on April 12, 2023. It said, "We have been asked by the school administration to remind athletes that the school dress code applies to athletes at practice and meets also. Athletes are not allowed to practice only in their sports bras because the school dress code states the students must ensure that underwear is covered by outer clothing." In discussions of the dress code, people always talk about the need for girls to dress modestly so that boys are not distracted. First of all, this problem should not be put on girls to solve. Girls should be able to dress comfortably, and they should not be held responsible for how their clothing choices makes other people feel. During track practice, the temperature gets very unbearable, and making girls wear another layer to cover up affects performance. All of my friends on the team feel much better when they are practicing in what they are comfortable in, and on hot days, we aren't allowed to wear sports bras. We don't get much done because we're overheating. I have spoken to friends of mine on different boys' sports teams who practice in close proximity to us, and they agree the rule is absurd. They have stated that sports bras aren't even revealing and that they aren't concerned with us and our practice because they're focused on their own. On a particular day recently when it was very hot out, we were told to put our shirts back on. All of us tucked our shirts completely into our sports bras because it was too hot otherwise. This shows the exact same amount of skin a sports bra does, but for some reason it was acceptable, while sports bra isn't. The Albany School District already dealt with this and solved the issue in 2022. A separate category in their dress code called Specific Activity Dress Codes states that certain activities may have different attire expectations and specifically allow for girls to wear sports bras during practice. All athletes need to be comfortable and safe from overheating during practice. That's the only consideration that's important. Signed, Olivia Mayer, 9th grade GHS. And number 2. This is from Jessica Kearney. I'm writing in as a parent of Guilderland Central School District children. We were told that this Friday before Memorial Day will be taken away as a contingent holiday. We had 2 snow days and a declared New York State emergency snow day, which makes our total snow days 3. According to the governor's office, when a New York State emergency is declared and a school closes its doors, we can apply for a waiver. Is this correct? And then why was our contingent holiday taken away? Also, from information I received, Guilderland Central School District had 185 total teachable days in our year. The state mandate is 180. In a year where everyone is running at a bare minimum staffing and struggling mentally, the staff and children deserve this day. Is this information correct? And if so, why was the day taken away? Thanks for clarifying. Jessica Kearney. And the last public comment is written nice and big. As a member of the Guilderland Schools track team, I was reminded of the current dress code at our school. With the weather turned warmer, it was important for our athletes to know that they cannot wear sports bras alone. Cropped running tanks were okay, but only with a bra worn underneath, and wearing a sports bra even on hot days would be breaking the rules. This led me to really contemplate the difference between a cropped tank and a sports bra. Coverage I assumed at first. So my mother brought me a athletic crop top online so we could compare. In terms of coverage, the crop top is the same length as all of the sports bras between myself and my 2 sisters, and the fabric on the sports bra is thicker and more supportive. So what's really the issue here? A perceived risk of distracting other students? If that's the case, it seems to me that the rights of said distracted students should not outweigh the rights of athletes to allow for comfort and increased surface area for the body to be cool. If students and or staff members are distracted or uncomfortable with a female running in a sports bra or a male student running shirtless, then isn't really the onus on the person feeling distracted? Isn't it also distracting currently for staff to try and assess whether a student is wearing a crop running top or a sports bra? Obviously, wearing a sports bra alone would not be a good idea across all sports, but please give us a policy that gives us options, makes sense, and is fair. Angelica Sophia Parker, 9th grader. Are there any other public comments? No? Okay. So, I know we're discussing the sports bra policy, and maybe we could discuss it a little bit later in the meeting when we go to the policy comments. As far as the contingent school day, do we have any comments on?
I can address that. The initial question was, is it correct that the state of emergency that the governor declared makes it possible for us to ask for a waiver? That is not correct. The only time it's correct is if we were completely out of available snow days and could not make it up. So we were not eligible to apply for a waiver. So we have to go to school on Friday. I know everyone is tired, but.
I know. I know we discussed it last meeting too.
Yes.
Very interesting conversation this morning about the topic. I know we discussed it at the meeting. And the public comment, so we have on the agenda for a little bit further down talking about the topic that, of the firefighter tax, and I'm not exactly sure the process, but I'd love to be able to bring that to the top and maybe at least get some information out. I know we're going to have a public hearing on it, or maybe this is the time where we decide if we're going to have that public hearing, but I'm sure it will happen.
I can provide an overview of the law, the policy we have the potential to enact, go through eligibility in the timeline, give a rough estimate of what the impact might be within the school district, and then talk about board district next steps if we want to follow them.
So I think this is an appropriate time to do that. So do I just
take it away, Andrew?
Yeah,
well,
motion.
Okay, please, Andrew, go ahead and do your topic. That's further down on the list.
I want to thank everyone for showing up. We had at a board committee, business committee meeting, a number of the people who are in the audience today came and spoke and provided very useful feedback. In the state, real property tax law 466A allows municipalities, including school districts, to provide a 10% reduction in assessed property value to certain volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers. And the criteria for eligible recipients would be they have to live in the community serviced by their fire department or ambulance service, use the property that would be eligible as their primary residence, use it only for residential use, or if it's a mixed use, only the portion of the property that's used for residence would be eligible. And then they would have to be certified by the volunteer fire company or ambulance corps as having met criteria that would be established or adopted by the board, with the caveat that one of the criteria would be a minimum service requirement of 2 to 5 years. So that is the broad eligibility, and then there are a few additional add-ons to that, which is if someone has 20 years of service, it becomes permanent as long as the property remains their primary residence. A surviving unmarried spouse of a recipient who is killed in the line of duty can receive the benefit as long as the property remains their primary residence, provided that the deceased spouse who had killed in the line of duty was a member for at least 5 years and was receiving the exemption at the time of their passing. And then we would have the additional option of providing the benefit to surviving unremarried widows of volunteer firefighters or ambulance workers with at least 20 years of service, provided again that the spouse maintains residency or the property as their primary residence. Timeline for enacting. To apply for this, you have to apply by March 1st. So the earliest it could go into effect for the school district, if it was enacted this year, before March 1st, 2024, would be for the 2024-25 school year, that tax levy. The next part, thinking about what the impact might be, first want to give the very large caveat that all of these are projections. We don't know the final assessed value. We don't know the actual number of potentially eligible recipients, but based on numbers and estimates provided by the Fire Chiefs Association, I would project that there would be approximately 150 firefighters who might be eligible for the exemption. And the total assessed value for those firefighters would be about $41.5 million of property. Using the, again, early tax rate projections we have for next year, that would be about $75,000 total, or roughly $490 per eligible recipient if everyone received it. So what would the way taxes and levies work is the school district, for our budget, we propose a levy, which is the fixed amount of money from local community to support our budget, and then that is distributed across the assessed value. So the levy, the amount of money the school district itself receives would not change. The distribution across residents would through their taxes. So for the average, or for the taxpayer as a whole, the impact would be about 2 cents per $1,000 of property value. So if someone has a house assessed at $250,000, the annual impact to their taxes would be an additional roughly $4.50. Now, for the district-specific timeline, the business committee met with the Fire Chiefs Association, discussed it, voted to bring it to the board for further discussion without a specific recommendation. Then the board tonight can consider whether to hold a hearing, and then the hearing is the final step before adopting, if the board wishes to adopt the policy.
Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
I just have two related questions, I think. The requirement for minimum service of 2 to 5 years, do different districts determine that range? Like, do some districts determine 2 years, other districts determine 5 years?
Yes, we have the ability to, what would likely happen is we would adopt a point system. The town of Guilderland has already adopted this exemption for town taxes, and they have a rubric. My suggestion would be that we would look to that.
And then my related question is, does it have to be continuous years of service, or can it be a cumulative, whatever we come up with, 2 to 5 years?
That I do not know. Do you know? I know that second part, that it has to be with it, but I don't know about the...
I would support this going forward with a public hearing.
I think we should take it to public hearing. We should do the next step
Absolutely.
and give the opportunity. I've supported it. I support it now, and I'd love to hear what the community thinks.
Judy, do you have any comments from the business practices? I was in it as well. It was a really great meeting, and really appreciate you guys coming out to answer all the questions we had, and we had a lot. Do you have any comments?
Well, with the concerns of how it would affect the other, the remaining taxpayers in the town, was a concern, is a concern. And Andrew addressed that. It doesn't seem like it would be huge, but it is a concern because our budgets are always a concern, that we want to be fair to everybody. And people see something like that, and, you know, no matter how appreciative we are, there are people who aren't as appreciative of that. And that was sort of, I think, the feeling of the people there.
Such a way that's understandable, at least for me. Go ahead, Gloria.
I think having the public hearing would be the next step, because that issue that came up with business practice was, you pointed out, how would we don't know, we can't get into other people's heads. So let's have a public hearing, let's hear it. I mean, we felt very positive sitting there, but let's move on, let's to the next step.
Want to have a public hearing. So
Do we need a motion?
Do we need a motion to do that?
Motion.
No? Okay, so we'll schedule one fairly soon. whatever works for the schedule for the summer, that we can have the best participation. Sound like a plan?
We
Is
want
there
to
any-
look at June because summertime is, people scatter, and so we'll look to
okay.
June. The next board meeting is on June 13th, if you want to kind of plan ahead a little bit.
Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. It's great to see this, everybody.
You're welcome to stay.
You're welcome
you
to
don't-
stay and listen.
But you don't have to.
We're going to get back to our agenda, and the next item is the program report, the building equity action plans. I'd like to invite Matt.
There's only 40 slides.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I do apologize that my mic is off. I'll project. Oh, no, you are getting me? All right, cool. So I may not have a robot, but I have really bad jokes, so I feel like that should balance out somewhere. I can project my water bottle if that's helpful. But really what we'd like to do tonight is go over the equity plans across the 7 buildings in our district, as well as to see how does the district have a plan to tie those things together and be able to move in a cohesive direction. So before we get into the building specific plans, there are a few things that seemed very pertinent to make sure we went over. The first of which is just background of this work. So the process of actually creating equity plans for each building was spread out across 3 months. This was January through March, where teams of about 10 from each school ended up meeting in this very room. So this was the room where it happened, you might say, if you're a Hamilton fan. I told you, the bad jokes are like number one. Someone get a tally going. So this was really where we gathered and where we did a lot of the work. And these were full day sessions. So this was part of our work with Progression Partners, but teams also ended up having a lot of these informal conversations afterwards, and folks would email me, or in different buildings have some of those personal conversations, and I know people talk to community members, which was a big part of the input. Now, the work for Progression Partners in totality, that encompassed workshops where we gathered together, and we had training sessions that started over summer. First with the leadership team to get the ball rolling, to make sure that we were coming and approaching things from the same lens. Then we brought in teachers and did some in-service over summer. And then afterwards, we had sessions throughout the year where we did a lot of this work. Also factoring into the plans, and I'll touch on this in a bit, were things like equity walks, where we had team members go throughout the buildings themselves, taking stock of what we see physically on the walls, how accessible are our buildings, are things available in multiple languages. So the accessibility piece we'll touch on shortly, but that was one of the factors of the walks. We also were able to take into account data, which I'll circle back to again later, but data both qualitative and quantitative. And so the plans are really a reflection of the year's worth of work. Now, when we were building the plans, we wanted to focus on 5 core elements, and those elements are assessing cultural knowledge, valuing diversity, managing the dynamics of difference, adapting to diversity, and then institutionalizing cultural knowledge. And from those 5 points, as of right now, they might just sound like buzzwords to you. So I thought it might be helpful, and some of this is even pulled from the presentations that staff used in their different buildings. But really, the essential elements that the plans were guided by were the first 3 principles: assessing culture, valuing diversity, and managing the difference. So when we talk about assessing culture, this is where the focus groups came in. This is where the equity learning walks came in. This is where we got information from students. This is where we were like, okay, what is the actual lived experience of the community in this space. So this, and when I say community, I really do mean it. It's students, it's staff, regardless of title and position, it's parents, it's community members, anyone who interacts with that building for whatever the purpose may be. So what is the environment like for folks? This is, if we're thinking about it in terms of qualitative versus quantitative, the cultural piece is really going to be a mix of the two, because there are certain things that, okay, we can point to hard numbers verifying different things, but some of it is also really just about that lived experience part. Valuing diversity is the next component of it, and this is where we take it and say, okay, here are the elements of our building, but what are we actually doing, not just to say that, hey, sure, we have a diverse group of people, but to be able to act on it and say that we are promoting and actively seeking out a way to make sure that our learning environments and our schools are safe and comfortable places for all. And then managing the difference. So this is now where we get to the capacity building part, because it's one thing to see where, okay, our goal is to hit this benchmark, then this benchmark, but in truth, and all of you know this as well, but that's not really enough. And that's not going to meet the bar for where we want to be. We have to build the capacity so that we can continue to rise and meet the needs of students, because our demographics are going to continue to change over time. Student needs are going to change over time. Staff needs are going to change over time. And the idea is for our staff to increasingly reflect our student body. So for us to be able to manage the difference, that means not trying to contain it, but really to be able to lean into it and say, how do we become better as a result of it? Now, the primary tool that we did to assess those three parts is the cultural proficiency continuum. That was how we measured our cultural competence. And this tool is one actually that is seen and used by students even. So in a program that we've mentioned before, the Training for Understanding, that's something that I run alongside Brian Mazza, one of the assistant principals at the high school. We've done this with sports teams, we've done this in different classrooms and large scales, whether it's the entire grade level. So many of our students have been exposed to the continuum in general. And really the continuum ranges from what is the worst thing that we can think about when it comes to a cultural piece. That would be cultural destructiveness. So this is where we would think about that as being like blatant racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, where it is like just undoubtedly you are seeing the difference and you're trying to get rid of it. And you are clearly articulating that there are problems with someone existing for who and how they are. And so this is one of those areas where unfortunately the truth is that there are elements where this exists in pockets, and our hope is not to turn a blind eye, but to make sure that we see, okay, what are the areas where we may have cultural destructiveness? Even if it's not from a system lens, if it's existing and impacting students, then we know that that still is something. If we're trying to truly assess our culture, we have to be cognizant of things like that. And so an example would be saying to a student, you can't pray now, we're about to start a quiz and have a full agenda today. So we see the difference, and this might be something recently we just end up coming from the month of Ramadan, and so a student is trying to pray and saying no, not allowing someone to participate in something that is so deeply intricate on both a cultural and religious level. Cultural incapacity, so you see the difference and you make it wrong. So an example of this would be, but most students celebrate Christmas here, let's just throw a Christmas party. And this is something that I know is a spot that can be very contentious. It can feel hard because this is very much a majority right kind of mentality, where it's, well, yes, but most people don't feel this way, or well, that doesn't affect everyone, or on average, students don't feel this way, so it's just okay. And when we see that, and what happens in these settings, it's taking students' identity factors, it's taking staff's identity factors, and really what you're saying is that that doesn't have a place here. So you're not actively saying that like they don't belong, but it's that their identity doesn't have a place in the systems that are functioning at our school level. And so that's something that we want to make sure that we're also avoiding there. So you'll see the goal is for us to continue moving left to right, and as I progress, one of the activities that staff members did in a bunch of different buildings was try to identify where are we at each one of these levels. What things exist in the building that fall under destructiveness, incapacity, blindness, so on and so forth. And I'll kind of go through the other ones quickly but I think it's important for us to understand the metric that we use, because this is really the foundation of the plans. And so I won't get bogged down in the details later, but I just want to make sure that we understand how we were evaluating and the thing that was in staff's mind as a guiding force. So with cultural blindness, so when that's seeing the difference but acting like you don't. So this would be, I don't see color in my students. And just as an aside, and quite frankly, on a bit of a personal level, I do want to speak to that point because I think for many adults, that was the way that you were taught to be polite. That was the way that you were taught, like, hey, so I don't want you to see color. I don't want you to be like aware of these things. Why can't we all just get along and act like those things don't exist? Well, again, bringing the personal into it, I am a black man. I'm a person of color. Some things that like you can see. There's also parts of my identity that aren't visible, such as me being a Latino male. Like you can't see that, and that's not just something that you would know without knowing me. And I think when we discount those figures, the reason why cultural blindness is an issue is we limit the understanding that we have of people's stories and the way that they are impacted by different decisions that we make. So cultural blindness can very easily fall into cultural incapacity when we don't acknowledge those things. And when we say, well, it doesn't really matter to me what religion my students have, we're all the same, well then that leads into the same kind of things of not allowing people to pray or saying we all celebrate Christmas, so on and so forth. In cultural pre-competence, this is where we're starting to be able to get to where we want to be and where we need to be. So we see the difference and we're responding to it not necessarily the right way. So the best way to put that is this is where we're trying, where we're making an effort. Now, pre-competence is not a bad place to be. To be honest, one of the things that I've said regularly to staff, to students as well, is that I would be happy if people are able to be in pre-competence, because what that says is at the bare minimum, you're willing to be okay with discomfort. You're willing to commit to being a learner, and that's really what pre-competence is. Now, you don't want to exist there permanently, but that's a spot where if we can get folks there, then the rest of it becomes a lot easier work. And so this would be like, an example, we already celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Cinco de Mayo. What can we do for American Indians next month? And so, people, they're like, okay, hey, we see different things and you're not necessarily on the mark, but you are trying. And I think that that means you're open to it. Because even if we look at this, that is a question. And that question means that you're open to getting an answer. And so then we have cultural competence. So now you see the difference, you accept the difference, and you're willing to respect it. So an example of that would be the lens we choose changes how we look at things. How might another group think about this? So we're starting to be very, very cognizant. And the questions have taken the next level. It's not necessarily about a specific day and saying, hey, well, we have Juneteenth, that means that there's no longer any racism. It's not like we're looking at things from that lens, but we're willing to say, okay, we've done this, what comes next? Which leads us right into cultural proficiency. And where we see the difference, we respond positively and we advocate for it with equity and with inclusion. So this is now, let's reassess this activity to be able to see if it still meets the needs of our students next year. And so the idea, again, was to make sure that we were moving as far from cultural destructiveness to proficiency, but also taking a mirror to be able to see where do we fall in different categories. One of the most challenging parts that went into the plans was the notion of looking through mirrors and seeing windows. So from day one, the very first thing that we did was to start to identify some of our own identity factors, to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and say, what are the things that I might have blindness to? And the truth is, even when I look at myself, my position, there is not anyone on the planet who is culturally proficient in everything at all times. That's just not, it's just not true. But what we can do is say that we won't go into those blatant things. Like me saying that we're not all proficient does not mean that we need to dabble into destructiveness and be like, I just say some racial slurs every now and again. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But if we're in pre-competence, that's okay, because that means that we're committed to learning. And that's really where I see the value in DEI work. It's in being committed learners, just like we ask our students to be. So some of the common strands of plans, despite the fact I just talked for about 35 minutes right there, I really do want to kind of condense this for all of you. But it's a year's worth of work. And so there's so much that went into it. And I really can't stress how much all the teams worked. So one of the ways that we're going to look at things is seeing common strands that emerged in the different plans. And from those common strands, we'll then dive into some of the specific ways that teams and buildings were planning to approach this work. So the first common strand is using data in order to drive the decision making of this plan for each of the buildings. Now, I broke this into two different parts, both quantitative and qualitative. So, you know, for folks watching at home or even for anyone here, when we're talking quantitative, this is looking at things like state report card information. This is looking at our attendance data, discipline data. This is looking at, okay, what are we seeing in terms of like literacy rates? What are we seeing in terms, like, so disproportionality and how we as a system are handling things. This is also looking at programs and seeing their efficacy. So an example that comes to my mind would be the Focus program. And in fairness, I am biased towards Focus. I love it, it's near and dear to my heart, but it's seeing, okay, what is this doing for students' achievement? How were we able to measure what students were, how they were, you know, in our environment beforehand, and then their grades afterwards would be an example of using quantitative data. But I'm also a very big believer that you cannot, in order to do a real assessment, do one without the other. So as much as the numbers might show us what's happening, the numbers don't tell us why it's happening, and that's where the qualitative data comes in. Because it's the two of them truly that make the complete picture. So we may see something where, okay, hey, we have disproportionate suspensions, or we may see that we have a certain group of students that is struggling with attendance, but that doesn't really explain why. And this is where the qualitative piece came in. So this was the equity walks. This was focus groups that happened for each of the buildings. And one thing that I definitely want to note, this came up from a lot of the teams, they mentioned this. It came up in DEI subcommittee work. Parents have just reached out to me independently and said this. But that was a moment that really stood out to families and to the community in general. Being able to have a voice in that platform. I know some of you were able to attend some of those focus groups, and that was a sentiment that was widely expressed by folks who were there. Regardless of how they felt about different issues, everyone felt it was really, really powerful to have a voice. And I just wanted to highlight that because I think that that should not be lost on us, and it's not lost in the plans, because that's something where everyone was cognizant to say, okay, we need to make sure that whatever form that takes, and you'll see it look different in different plans, but that we're able to still get community feedback. Community meaning, of course, again, students, staff, and then parents and everyone else who's part of that learning engagement. And also people knew that this could not be just reliant on data from the 2022-2023 school year. We're going to need to keep on updating this, and this is something that's a continued process. That leads directly to the idea of progress monitoring. So teams are all going to be doing regular meetings next year and beyond, because the plans are broken into short-term, medium, and long-term goals. And so they necessitate further meeting, they necessitate getting new input. In fact, even this year already, some of the elements of different plans have been implemented and have been underway. But also there's been a concerted effort to try to make sure that even just recently, there are, like I'm seeing in the email threads, teams are planning and meeting like as we speak. That's something that is on the forefront of people's minds, because we wanted to make sure we hit the ground running here, but also that we were able to make sure that when we get into next year, we're positioned and poised for teams to really be as able to do what they need to as they can. And this also means that people want to expand it beyond just the 10 members of the team. One of the things that was also a common strand amongst team members, it hit a lot of folks very, very early on, and they were like, oh, we can't do this by ourselves. And they saw, you know, this is 10 people per building, and they were like, okay, so this is something where we have to be able to engage folks across our building. And this is, maybe not everyone's doing every single thing, and they break down different roles, but this was an important thing where it's, how do we build that capacity, just like we saw earlier, that people are like, okay, we have to make sure that we're all able to be equal stakeholders in this. And finally, accessibility. And it certainly is not the least important thing, but it is critical and crucial. With accessibility, one of the goals was to make sure that we're talking about this from both physical accessibility, but also from a place of language, from a place of mental health. Are our buildings warm environments? And so when we did our equity walks, they started outside the building. So we looked at things such as, when you're walking into this building, what is it, the feeling that you get? And if you are someone who's a parent, if you are a student, we looked at it from the lens of, if you are in, you know, a migrant family, if you are someone who has X, Y, and Z disability, like, oh, the range of different things, to make sure that we were taking all those different factors into account. So those are going to be reflected in the plans as well. Now we'll start off with our elementary buildings, and just for ease, I did things in alphabetical order here. So for Altamont, this first school that we'll start with, their goal, the first thing, was expanding the committee to make sure that they had representation across grade levels. So even though I mentioned there were 10 members, the 10 members doesn't mean that there's 10 teachers. So it was 10 people, including the building principal. We wanted to make sure we included clerical staff. We wanted to make sure that we were able to include TAs, and really anyone who wanted to be able to have a voice in this could. And even people who weren't on the equity teams could have a voice through the focus groups and different platforms like that. So they also want to make sure that they're able to engage in summer curriculum. And this is a really, really big part about that communication and broadening the scope of who's able to be impacted was the family survey. And they want to continue equity learning walks in their building as well. So some of the goals for this, they want to make sure that everyone is able to have a baseline understanding of DEI and that it's imbued throughout their grades, and that there's a continuous flow to things. So it doesn't feel choppy, or doesn't feel as if any teacher is siloed, or, well, so-and-so is on the team and has training and is doing this really well. Well, if we all are able to have a cohesive vision, then we're able to make a solid plan for it. And the other thing was specific to that building, a desire to increase student and staff understanding and fluency with different abilities, disabilities, the various needs that may arise in kids, and be able to just be more proficient in that category. To that end, one of the ideas was to establish buddy classrooms for our comprehensive skills programs classrooms, or CSP classrooms, and to be able to really say that when we talk about inclusion, we're doing that in a real meaningful way, and that it's not something that becomes tangential or anecdotal. Furthermore, the idea of creating a collaborative context, this is making sure that, hey, in our teacher leader meetings, when we have grade level things, that this is going to be something that's imbued throughout. And this ends with the playground also being made more accessible. So the idea here is for consistency and to make sure that they are really hitting on some of the needs that got expressed during some of the focus group work. For GES, some of the highlights from their plan, it's identifying resources because they want to make sure that they're able to have continuous PD, and this is reflected in some of their current PD program, where they have like Win Wednesdays, where it is centered on PD, what people feel necessary, and there's a menu of choices for staff, and so they want to see this, but it's about increasing staff capacity. And they also wanted to make sure that they're able to have a schedule of different things throughout the year, so it doesn't feel like it's just ad hoc, while also still making sure that there's room as things arise for people to be able to meet the needs that come up in time. Furthermore, one of the things that is specific to the needs of the building was a focus on translation services and making sure that we were able to better reach students and families. This was something that also came up in the DEI committee, and I'm sure it's popped up in other places. I wouldn't be surprised if many, if not all of you, have heard families say things to different capacities about, teachers and administrators reaching out about those kinds of things, because that is certainly a need in that catchment. And to complete that, layering in more social emotional learning and having that imbued throughout. And so the idea is for the students to be able to have a sense of ownership in the building, as well as to make sure that there's access throughout, so that people don't feel put on the margins, and that from the moment they walk in, that they know that this is a school that is for them as well. And this goes for families, this goes for anyone in between. For Linwood, one of the things, again, we're seeing similar to PD, but the way that they phrased it was building background knowledge about DEI work to make sure that we had common language. And they also wanted to make sure that their equity team was able to delegate different roles so that they could do a division of things and have people who are able to specialize in different roles. So I hate to use this comparison just because I know history with it, but really the idea, well, I'll just say division of labor. Because once you have people specializing in tasks, then we're able to have subject matter and content experts. I'm not going to say the assembly line. If you know, you know. But really the idea is just to make sure that we were able to have expertise in a range of different fields. And so to that end, this includes looking at data. And they know that that's going to be one of the key focal points for them. They want to do this consistently and regularly. And they want to make sure that they have a streamlined process for sharing out information. So communication is something that's being built into their plan, as well as making sure that they have common language. Now, one thing that actually both of the points on the what here are things that the Linwood team shared are key points for them. Things that they are really, really proud of, and things that they wanted to make sure all of you were able to hear tonight. That they're hosting a book study for the 23-24 school year, and the number of respondents really they felt was indicative of what it means to be a Linwood staff member, a Linwood employee. Someone who is always willing to learn, someone who's eager to try to grapple with new things, and they were able to see similar kind of engagement with how do we make sure that DEI is imbued in all of our structures. Because something that they told me, this was in October last year, was, hey, you know, when you come to Linwood, you're gonna see that like we find something and we're passionate about it, we're gonna go all in with it. And that was how they felt about that second bullet point, that this is, okay, we're committed, we see value in this, we don't need to be convinced, so we gotta make sure that this is something that happens everywhere and throughout our entire system. And they're going to build from already some of the work that they're doing and have started this year with defining shared community values. And they want to build with that and continue to go forward and make sure that all members of the community are welcome into that. At Pine Bush, some of the key points that they are working on right now include making sure that teachers and support providers are able to have conversations and do regular work surrounding supporting students who receive multiple services. So an example of this might be, let's say you have a student who is in reading support, may also need math support, may need some language support, may need just support in a wide range of things, may be receiving some more nuanced services, and they just want to make sure that we're not trying to do a one-size-fits-all solution, because each student is an individual, and they want to make sure that that's reflected in the plan as well. Something else, the second bullet point is something that they've already actually done, and they started that this year, making sure that they have the children's mission statement posters in each room of the building, because they want each space to be affirming. And this goes in concert with a plan to make sure that we have a gender-neutral bathroom on either side of the building. While there are classroom bathrooms, but they want to make sure that not everyone has one, and so if a student is in the hallway, there's able to be an affirming space for them there as well. Furthermore, one of the things that they are very, very focused on was inviting families to provide professional development for staff and to be able to be a part of that learning community. I'll share a story from one of the DEI committee members who mentioned that they were able to come in as a mystery reader and the impact that that had on them as a person, and how they felt so much more connected to the Pine Bush community afterwards. So that's another thing that's already been underway, but they want to make sure that they're more intentional about it, and particularly coming back from the pandemic where a lot of these things were kind of put on hold, this is something that they want to make sure does not get put to the back burner again. And one thing that I think leans into the quantitative piece that Pine Bush emphasized was the review of vocab and language structure for tests to make sure that there's equity imbued even in the way that students are being assessed. And that part arose, again, due to some of the data that they saw rising up and some of the student subgroups that they saw struggling in different areas. And like, okay, so then that means that we need to reassess our practice to make sure it's as equitable as can be. Next, and certainly not least from the elementary buildings, is Westmere. And their big thing is to take a look at the existing structures. We saw this in some other plans. But some of the things that they specifically pointed to, things like open house, staff meetings, family fun nights, to engage families. And that's something that they've been doing and have really put effort into already changing. Now, this wasn't one of the things that they had wanted to make sure was highlighted, but I also think that it's really, really important to note that they have had some work to try to have like an interactive calendar towards the front of the building so that families are able to come in, students are able to come in and learn about different cultures. And that also plays into something that they started and have done some significant work with, which is signage, because they also realize that language could be a significant barrier in their building. So there's now images that go alongside different things. So for cafeteria, there's also an image that would depict that. For bathrooms, there's an image that would depict that. For the offices, for the nurse, for gym, whatever, there's the gymnasium, there's images that go alongside those things, really to help students navigate and to help families feel comfortable in the building, regardless of whether English is their primary language or not. And for the team at Westmere, one of the things that they really wanted to focus on was leaning into that assessing the culture piece and making sure that students feel safe and comfortable. and they wanted to make sure that that was true across any of the different protected classes, across any of the identity factors. And so that was something that came up in their walk as one of the things that they definitely wanted to emphasize and have a lot of focus on. For our secondary buildings, looking first at Farnsworth, one of the things that they wanted to do was similar to Westmere, make sure that there was inclusive signage, but also make sure that there was ways for effective communication and regular and consistent communication with families. And also say that we need to have a roadmap outlined for DEI-focused trainings to make sure that there's a continuous plan and that staff know here's the progression of where you are and where we want you to be. So this is in conjunction with some of the work that they've been doing, quite frankly, for years at this point, but it also is something that there's also a lot of new staff. And equity work isn't something that once you have a training or a workshop, you check the box and you're done, because there's all sorts of new learning. I can tell you firsthand, I'm not even remotely close to knowing everything that I need to know, and that staff also has the same understanding, and so they want to make sure that they're able to have continued work in that space. Furthermore, they want to make sure that they have protocols in place for working with and supporting families with diverse backgrounds, because FMS is the first place where you now have students from all of the different catchments in the same location. And whereas each school at the elementary level was able to really focus in and be more precise and surgical with their approach to things, FMS needed to make sure that they were able to reach the gamut from Altamont over to Westmere and everyone in between and say, okay, how do we support all these different learners? And to that end, they wanted to make sure that the data team was a part of that process, because we know that data has to be the driver behind these decisions, that it can't just be about we think this is what's going on. We need to know whether that's the numbers telling us or students, families, and other stakeholders themselves telling us. For the high school, I want to share some quotes that team members sent to me. The first one was our equity walk was some of the most beneficial, productive, and important work I've ever done, so we're implementing them next year for everyone to experience. And this was an overwhelming feeling for high school staff. They felt that, especially at the secondary level, it can be very, not even just secondaries, high school specifically, it can be very easy to be locked into your content. And at the middle school level, there still is teaming, so it's a bit easier to have some of those natural interactions across content. But it can be very easy to get siloed, like for me, social studies, and to not necessarily see as many math teachers or science teachers or art teachers. And the equity walk was a place where people really got a full context for the building and for what our students go through. And so the idea is to recreate those to make sure that other staff are able to have that same experience, so that we can then be more malleable and responsive to what students' needs are. Another thing is making sure that we continue the use of departments in order to lead this DEI work. And an example of one that just happened was with English, how they led some work surrounding microaggressions, so that every single student in the high school was able to engage in conversations surrounding microaggressions, what they mean, what they are, what they aren't, and making sure that we utilize departments in different ways, whether this is in terms of leadership, whether this is in terms of allyship, and just make sure that this is a across the board thing, so it's not just siloed to one spot. Another thing, we saw this in other buildings, but again, making sure that there's culture responsive teaching practices imbued, and continuing some of the focus group work that we've already seen happen. So in the high school, really from the fall till now, there have been different efforts made to make sure that students are able to be engaged, they're able to have a voice, and this isn't culminating, but it does pair very, very well with the anti-hate rally coming up, because it has been about student voices. And one of the things that high school administration and the equity team themselves saw, and really had reaffirmed, I should say, is that it's important to have events like the anti-hate rally, but it's also quite necessary to have sustaining things throughout the year, where students are able to feel that change on a micro level, and where it feels very, very personal, and they see themselves as one of 10 students in the room. So that's something that they wanted to continue for that end as well. That leads us to the final thing. You've been very great so far. I promise I'll sprinkle some water if you want. But the very last thing, I won't do that, COVID. So the last thing is just some of the district-wide initiatives that we have that partner and go along well with these plans. So one of the things you saw was a lot of emphasis on professional development and staff training. So the district has also made a point to say, okay, so to do that, we want to make sure that we increase our capacity to engage staff in that process. Furthermore, this means dedication of time, and this is reflected in superintendent's conference days, where we're able to do that, or in special time such as we had this year, which we're not going to do that exact model again for next year, but where it was just literally time throughout the day to say, okay, equity work doesn't happen overnight, and it's not something that we can just blink and expect it to go through. So what we really need to do is make sure that staff have the time to engage in this. And this is now supporting buildings in their PD plans. This is supporting staff in being able to do some PD. This also is reflected in some of the work that has happened. I'll give two different examples. So with authors at the elementary level, having Eric Velasquez come in and do some work, and then also at the high school level, having Brendan Kiley come in and do some work with students. And so those kinds of things that the district is supporting, that's really the lens of it. So there's a keen and sharp awareness that the problems that we see, we want to make sure that we have localized solutions so that they're the most effective. And the district wants to be able to support whatever those endeavors are, trusting the people who've gone through the work, who've been part of the equity plans to do that. Now, the district also is engaging in use of data. This is something that throughout the trainings, I'll just give her a shout out real quick. Lisa Knowles really was leaning into this and emphasizes again and again the use of data. And we're talking both qualitative and quantitative to be able to see, okay, what are the different needs that we have, and how do we, assign resources and time and all those other aforementioned things to be able to drive our initiatives. And then the last thing is collaborating with neighboring districts, because we also understand that our students don't live in just isolation in Guilderland and never interact with people outside. Our staff don't even necessarily all live in Guilderland. I mean, I live in Clifton Park. And so it's important that we don't pretend as if the world ends when we reach the borders of Guilderland, but to say, all right, how do we create enhanced opportunities for our students to be leaders in the spaces that they lead, and also to be able to be learners, and how do we continue to build a more sustainable and equitable region for our kids, because that's really what they deserve. So that is believe it or not, honestly, that's the abbreviated version of all the plans. So just think twice before you ask me back. But yeah, thank you. Are there any questions about stuff? Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for all of your efforts on this. I think the board would really appreciate, at some point, not tonight, but at some point, getting some of that data. You know, that quantitative data that you're talking about. I know it was really helpful. I think it was a meeting ago or 2 meetings ago when we got the data about state testing, and so something similar to that. With all of this equity work would be really helpful, at least to me. I don't know about the rest of you. And then I would love to see a copy of that children's mission statement that you referenced. I just would love to see that.
Yes. Sure.
In particular, I'd like to see how some of the other focus groups went. So more of a qualitative data.
Is the intent, the couple of groups I didn't see up there was the DO, and is that incorporated into the high school? That's
really the district-wide initiative.
Okay, and probably most importantly, where's the board going to be involved? Because in the sense of, we need to be trained as well.
Absolutely.
We don't want to, we don't want to sit on high and pass judgment. And I'll just say, I'm very glad that we held off on drafting any regulations until this came out. Because this is certainly, we're going to have to incorporate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Just because I didn't see it on the schedule, you mentioned the anti-hate rally. Can you just give us a brief thing of what time, where, when? Sure. I know this is Friday.
You sure you want brief?
Yeah.
All right, yes. So it's this Friday at 3:30, and the bus lot loop in front of the school.
That was very
Gotcha.
awesome.
It'll be great.
No.
It really will be.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. This is the third year, right?
Third year.
That's exciting.
Third year, and a lot of the original planners are seniors now. So this is, yeah.
Cumulative. Awesome. Thanks. All right, thank you so much. Awesome. Okay. So the next item on the agenda tonight is the consent items. Includes the minutes from the May 2nd, 2023 meeting, CPSC and CSC recommendations, personnel actions, financials. Do I have a motion to to approve the consent items, Blanca and Rebecca? Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye, passes 8-0. Okay, financials. Next, informational items. Send it over to Mike. Okay, name tags.
3 accolades I'd like to share tonight. The first is from Farnsworth Middle School. Farnsworth Middle School Mohawk 7B teachers Lauren Fox, Jamie Mullins, and Heather Tagliaferro are proud to announce 7 of their Mohawk 7B students have won local Capital Region competitions. 5 students were chosen as the winners of the 26th annual Black History Creative Expressions Contest sponsored by Delta Sigma Theta sorority. The competition was open to students in grades 3 through 12 in the Capital Region with 3 categories including creative expressions, written expression, and oral expression. The following students won the creative expressions category: Luciana Barty, Abby Colleton, Sumaya Kierjo, Swara Sadarvete, and Seneda Smirznak. Their one-pager collages were done as an assignment in the Combined Language Arts Social Studies class. Students were recognized at a reception and awards program on Sunday, May 21st at the New York State Museum Cultural Center. In addition, Sydney Geary was chosen as the winner of the Open Door Bookstore Writing Contest for 7th grade. Students were given the writing prompt, "Sometimes I wish I were a," and on their own time wrote a creative story of 2 pages responding to the prompt. Sydney was recognized on Saturday, May 13th, where she read her story aloud at the bookstore. Another Mohawk 7 student, Kira Gagliardi, was the runner-up. Mohawk 7B is very proud of these students, and congratulations to them and their teachers. Our second accolade is about our music program. For the 13th time, the Guilderland Music Department has the honor of being named one of the NAMM Foundation's best communities for music education. Programs designated for this nationwide honor exemplify community commitment to include music education as part of a quality education for all children. The Guilderland Music Department is proud of its long history of musical excellence and believes that every child deserves a comprehensive music education. Congratulations to the wonderful music students and supportive community on this well-deserved recognition, and to the entire music staff whose hard work, dedication, and innovation are reflected in this achievement. And then, finally, we are pleased to share from the art department that we have 3 members of the Guilderland High School who have had work selected for the Congressional Art Challenge. This is an annual art competition facilitated by Congressman Paul Tonko. The 3 students are Sevilla Baccaro of grade 12, Jenna Barbado, grade 12, and Savannah Plant, grade 12. And on your agenda, there are images of the students' work included. And all of these students completed these pieces in their art classes with Mr. Green. So congratulations to those students and to Mr. Green.
The next item is the volunteer fighter and ambulance worker tax exemption, which we moved up to the beginning, so you're off the hook for a little bit. So we'll move on to the superintendent information.
Okay, thanks so much. My first item also recognizes some great accomplishments of our students. The 26th Annual Black History Creative Expression Contest winners. Our students, this is offered through the Albany Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. And the students who were recognized are Luciana Barty, Abby Colleton, Sumera Karajo, Swara Sudavarte, and Zeneda Zmernak. Students in grades 3 through 12 from across the Capital District submitted written, artistic, and oral entries. A panel of judges from the community then scored the entries, and the top scoring students were invited to a reception and awards program at the New York State Museum Cultural Center. Congratulations to these students. It is quite an accomplishment. And then on May 9th, 2023, we hosted our Achievement Ceremony. On that evening, 27 retirees and 23 staff members who received tenure were invited to a celebration in the high school auditorium where they were recognized by their building principals, instructional administrators, and supervisors. We'd like to offer our congratulations to each and every one of them, and we want to thank Regan Johnson for putting together the program to really honor those in our community who are at the bookends of their careers, those who are just entering with tenure and those who are beginning the next chapter of their lives. It was a very nice event. And then last but not least, certainly a very important thing, it was just 1 week ago today that our community approved our budget vote for the 2023-2024 school year. Voters also approved a bus proposition, and we truly, truly appreciate our residents supporting our schools and the children that they serve. I also want to congratulate the 3 candidates elected to the Board of Education, Rebecca Butterfield, Kim Blasiak, and Judy Slack. Congratulations to our incumbents. I also want to thank and recognize Neil Sanders, who came out of retirement briefly to serve as our Chief Inspector, and of course Linda Livingston. Both did a ton of work to coordinate the vote and make sure everything went smoothly. The district also conducted an exit survey during the budget vote on that date. The purpose of the survey was to collect demographic data about who voted and why they voted the way they did, and those results will be available in a few weeks, and we'll post them to the district's website when we have them. And I just want to thank Cap Region BOCES Communications Service, and of course our communications specialists assigned here to Guilderland, Patrice Viverito, Patrick Molosky, and Natalie Rowan. I think they did a beautiful, beautiful job getting good information out to our community in lots of different forms. So my thanks to a lot of people who made a big difference and will give us a great year for next year. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is board president information. First is the proposed 2023-2024 Board of Education meeting dates. These are just informational for right now, isn't it?
They are, but I do want to point out, because this came out at the policy committee meeting, that our organizational meeting in July is on this draft scheduled for July 3rd, which is the Monday before July 4th. That may not be the best timing for people around the table. So I don't know if we want to look ahead to the next week. We could do, we have to have the meeting by law by the 15th of the month, but we could do the 10th or the 11th, whatever is most convenient for the board.
For the 5th? Is there a reason we could do the 5th?
We could do the 5th.
Doesn't matter. I think that would be
Do you want to try to do 5 and do it sooner in the month? Is that better? Yeah. Okay. July 5th it is.
Judy made a face. Would you prefer a different?
No, I have the problem.
Oh, so we do it already the other
No,
one, or different?
well, on the first 2 weeks of July, I'm away with the family, so I can't hold everybody up.
Isn't it always that?
Yeah, it's just that they got the reservation, so,
You can't make it any later because of the...
no.
Right.
No,
Sorry.
I could try to get remote.
Yes.
I will.
Okay. So, any other comments about it? So, looks like the 5th it is for now?
We actually adopt this.
Is it Ash Wednesday? Is it
No, it's a Wednesday.
Oh,
It's a Wednesday.
Okay, sorry. I thought there was another issue with it. Okay.
So we don't adopt this calendar of dates until the reorganizational meeting in July. However, we've also built the DEI committee meetings off of this, and they're going to be looking at the draft at their June meeting. So trying to make it coordinated for everybody.
Okay. So do we have to do anything more with this today?
No.
Okay, great. Also up for info is the Board of Education policies. There's 3 policies in there: anti-hate, diversity, equity, 1500R, public use of public buildings and grounds, and that fee schedule for that regulation. Okay. Next next item is action items. So we'll go back to Dr. Van Alstyne for business info.
On last Tuesday, the community approved the budget, approved the bond, and elected 3 members to the board. So we need to have a resolution and declaration supporting this.
Cast, did you say a motion to approve it? Blanca and Gloria, any comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor? Is this a
That's
roll
the
call?
bond resolution.
Okay.
So so this one was for approving the vote, and now the bond resolution is authoring us to pursue the bond that the voters authorized, and that one's a roll call vote. So this is the bus purchase bond resolution.
Okay,
That's the
so-
second item.
So we're approving that right now. All those in favor? Aye. Passes 8-0. The next one, go ahead.
So the bond resolution for purchasing the school boats has to be adopted by 2/3 of the board through a roll call vote.
Okay, so, well, we have the motion to, now you got me all screwed up. Motion to approve it? Motion, Rebecca and Gloria? And then we'll go to Linda for the roll call vote.
Ready?
Yes.
Now, Mrs. Blazek? Yes. Dr. Butterfield? Yes. Mrs. Shapiro? Yes. Mrs. Gonzalez Parker? Yes. Mrs. Person?
Yes.
Mr. Sabra? Yes. Mrs. Slav?
Yes.
Mrs. Tolman?
Yes. Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next item are private transportation contracts for a McKinney-Vento student from Green Island. We recommend awarding it to Amazing Grace.
Great. Motion to approve the private transportation contracts. Katie and Nate, second. Any comments or questions? None heard. We vote to approve it. Aye, yes. Votes 8-0. Next one.
The next is an agreement with SMG, the site manager of the MVP, formerly Times Union, formerly Pepsi, formerly Knickerbocker Arena, for graduation.
Great. So we need a motion to approve the SMG agreement. Rebecca and Gloria, any comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Passes 8-0.
All right, next item are internship agreements with the College of St. Rose, Grand Canyon University, and SUNY Albany.
Okay, need a motion to do the internship agreements, Katie and Rebecca. Any comments or questions? Nope. All those in favor? Pass 8-0.
All right, the next are 3 service agreements with Childhood Education Associate LLC, the Charlton School in Burn Hills, and Learn Well for services to students.
So we need a motion for Charlton School Agreement and the Childhood Educational Associates Agreement. Rebecca and second, Judy. Any comments or questions? All right. All those in favor? Passes 8-0.
Next is the accepting of a bid for service lines and dishwasher setup. This is for our cafeterias. We recommend accepting the bid from Singer Kittredge Equipment Company for $236,200. We opened bids on May 17th and received 4 bids, and this is the recommended recipient.
Okay, motion to accept the dishwasher bid. Blanca, second, Rebecca. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Passes 8-0.
The next one is a budget amendment to use fund balance to cover the tax certiorari claims that we've paid in the current year. On the whole, this is approximately $3 million, and we've been advised that we need to have this resolution. Want to make clear that next year, when we have the full scope of our exposure, we have the ability to bond to include restoring some of these funds to our fund balance or reserves.
Great. Do you have a notion to accept the bond, what do you call it? Bond amendment, budget amendment? Judy, second, Katie, all those, any comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye, passes 8-0.
All right. The next are budget transfers of $202,211. These are funds to cover charters and private school tuitions, private transportation contracts, and substitute teacher salaries.
Okay, a motion to accept the general fund transfers. Katie and Rebecca, any comments or questions? No? All those in favor? Aye, passes 8-0.
All right, thank you. The next item is declaring property to be surplus or obsolete. Board Policy 6900, disposal of district property, does not require we do this, but it is a best practice. The process for disposal is that these are made available for bid. Sealed bids are submitted, opened, and awarded to the high bidder, provided that the seller feels that adequate value is received for the item. And if nothing is sold, we are permitted to discard it or donate it to a government or nonprofit agency.
Okay, need a motion to accept the declaration of surplus / obsolete property. Gloria and Judy, any comments or questions? No? All those in favor? Passes 8-0.
The next item is to authorize the destruction of ballots when allowable. Our council recommends that we pass this resolution annually. State law permits the destruction of ballots after 6 months if there have been no legal proceedings filed contesting the results of the election.
A motion to destruct the ballots from 2022. Gloria, and second, Judy. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Passes 8-0.
Thank you. The next is cooperating or participating in BOCES cooperative bid for water sampling and testing. This is open to us because we are part of the Health Safety Risk Management Service through BOCES.
Okay, we need a motion for the BOCES cooperative bidding. Rebecca and Judy, any comments or questions? And all those in favor? Passes 8-0.
And my final item is accepting the donation of 10 cubic feet of soil from Coast of Maine's Growing Food Program. This will be used in the high school's organic garden.
Great. A motion to accept it. Nate and Judy, any comments or questions besides thank you so much? Great. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 8-0. That was a lot. Thank you. Next is superintendent action. Nothing for superintendent action. Any more comments? Great. Board president action is next. We have a set of policies, A through G, to approve for this evening. Can we have a motion to accept the board policies? Nate and Kim, are there any comments or questions?
I just want to note, letter F, 5151R should be the regulation that goes along with homeless children, not the student harassment and bullying prevention. The document is accurate, but the label here is not. We'll
Alright.
correct that in the minutes.
Okay. Okay, so, all in favor? All right, passes 8-0. Fantastic. Okay, board committee reports is the next item. We'll start with audit. Rebecca?
So we have not met since our last board meeting, but we do have a meeting in 2 weeks, on June 5th.
And communications, Gloria?
We have met since our last board meeting, and we are in the process of establishing a next meeting.
Okay. And policy, Nate?
We met last week on the 18th. We did discuss not only the exhibit we reviewed tonight, we looked at a few, and the field use policy, field fee policy that we all looked at tonight. We also discussed one of the things we got some comments upon today about the dress code, which, as I discussed at the last board meeting, was certainly something we were willing to hear about. We were told that there was concern about from some of the administration, and maybe I don't want to put Marie on the spot, but she was the one who talked to them. But there was concerns about changing the policy kind of haphazardly would result in more harm than good, if I'm paraphrasing it correctly.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So in between the first and second conversations of the policy committee on the dress code, I did bring together our middle school and high school principals, some of our assistant principals, our athletic director, and we didn't have a long conversation, but the discussion around trying to change the dress code in May was really not an efficient way to do without a lot more discussion. There also is some reluctance to make any changes to the dress code without further exploration. The point was made that the after school is an extension of the school day, and would making this change have an impact on the school day beyond that? I think the other comment that came up was that for the particular change that is being contemplated, those athletes need to compete wearing a singlet. So why wouldn't they practice in a similar kind of way? Obviously, this is a topic that, we've heard one side of. I don't know that we've heard other viewpoints on it, but I do think it would be worthwhile to do that.
Yeah, and I will follow that up by saying that everybody at the policy committee, certainly, we weren't shutting down the conversation at all. We certainly think it's something that we need to discuss and examine, but we also need to do it pragmatically, and to make sure that we're not making a change that's going to, again, like I said, create a bigger problem than we want it to. We want to be responsive to the concerns of both the administration and the students that are going to be affected by it. So this idea that pointing towards Albany, while seems simple, wasn't simple, and it isn't simple, and it isn't perfect. We don't want to create problems by simply being responsive to having a knee-jerk reaction to it.
I don't actually think that the Albany policy is something that we should adopt or follow suit, but I do think that we should explore this. We have support for exploring it further. So how do we keep it on the agenda, Nate? And what would you recommend the next steps be, Nate or Marie?
I mean, we are. I mean, I don't think we're against. I think we need to sit down and have it. It's probably pretty similar to how we address the anti-hate DEI. Is we need to sit down and develop policy language that is responsive to, as best we can. Everything can't be perfect. Can't have a perfect policy for anybody. It just doesn't exist. But we need to be responsive to and understand all the points, and I just don't think we have all the points. Our next, the next policy meeting will not be until after the new school year starts, or basically after July 5th now. So we have plenty of time to sit down and figure out the best way we can to be responsive to not only the administration's concerns about they're the ones who have to implement and enforce, and the students' concerns and about being comfortable, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. So the idea of just kind of, again, being concerned about being knee-jerk and just making a change to make a change is not the best way to go about it, especially something like this where it's clear that the administration has some concerns. So so to answer your question, Blanca.
I was going to say,
I'm sorry,
sure
a long way to get around to it. To answer your question, I think we need to have, at the next policy meeting, we'll certainly have a discussion. I think we should approach it the same way we did with the DEI stuff, is come in, bring in some ideas, sit down and workshop it.
It still sounds a little fluffy. Like, what are the next steps? So we're not going to have a meeting in June?
Nope.
Okay, so then it'll have to hold until, and who knows who will be on that committee?
Yeah.
So how do we keep it on the agenda? How do we make it not go away?
Whenever we establish the next policy committee, I think the next meeting, just put it on the agenda. I don't think, we can just make sure it's on Deb's radar for the next meeting minutes, or the meeting agenda, excuse me.
We can keep it on the agenda, and I almost would recommend that we bring some of the administrators in so they can share directly what, their perspective is, and maybe we also need to talk about how to get multiple perspectives on this, because we've had, a few, but we haven't heard other positions on this, and I do believe that they are out there, just have not come forward.
I guess that would just also, for those people that don't feel comfortable coming forward, there are other ways to get a hold of us, obviously,
right.
Confidentially. And, if somebody does, we want to hear voices, but if you don't feel comfortable in having that voice be made public, reach out to us confidentially, and we'll take those concerns to the policy, at the policy level. I mean, I might not be on the policy committee, so who knows? Somebody will be in charge of it. But again, we don't have a meeting, that's all we discussed last week, and we will not have a meeting scheduled until after the new school year starts.
I don't think it'll be dropped. I don't think it will. So we're going to continue to discuss it. Next committee is business practices. Judy?
And we don't have a meeting scheduled. Our last meeting was when we talked about the firefighters, and I think that was before the last board meeting. So.
We met yesterday. So we obviously talked a great deal tonight about the DEI work. Some other things that we talked about were that we received a number of letters of interest to join the DEI committee from students and parents and community members. And ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Wiles, will have those positions out shortly.
So we will send a letter to all of those who sent us letters of interest with the outcome. Board discussed it earlier today, and those who have been selected to serve on the committee will be appointed at the next gathering of this group, and then they'll be invited to come to the June DEI meeting.
We talked about some DEI in action across the district, including a recent cultural fair at Linwood that was really well received by both parents and students. I think Mr. Pinchinat mentioned that all of the 8th graders recently saw the movie Sweetwater about the integration of the MBA, and that was also very well received. We had a really wonderful discussion on a learning collaborative on anti-Semitism that was led by a graduating student, so a 12th grade student. Our next meeting is June 21st.
Great, thank you. Are there any more additional public comments?
So we had received one more about the sports bra, and I don't know if you ever responded and asked if it was supposed to be public, but we did receive one more.
Oh, yeah, it didn't say public comment. She just suggested to the board.
Okay.
Okay. Well, if that person wants to have a public comment, please let us know, and we'll read it next board meeting. Next, so no more public comments. Next is board issues, ideas, and sharing. Go ahead. Kim.
Okay. Actually, I have two things. First of all, I just wanted to share Pine Bush PTA just did their staff appreciation luncheon this past Friday. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. I shouldn't say this, but so sorry to other past presidents and stuff, but this was like the best one. It was so cool. And they did a camping theme, and it was just absolutely beautiful with like the mountains and the lights, and we had an outdoor like tent and stuff, but the committee just worked above and beyond. The staff was just so appreciative. And I also wanted to give props to the junior prom that happened on Saturday. I've heard nothing but great things about it. I know my son had a lot of video to share. But yeah, the kids, it seemed really good. I've heard nothing. They had such a good time.
No.
Oh, Gloria, go ahead.
Gloria,
do it. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. It's hard to see. I just wanted to say what a great time of year it is in terms of celebrating things. We had some great art shows. Both of the high school art show at the library, the elementary art show, the Farnsworth art show, and then it's a season of concerts. So music and art are all around us, and kudos to all the staff and the students for some beautiful, beautiful work.
And the students.
I said staff and students.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say that Gilderland High School PTSA is looking for volunteers and donations for the staff appreciation luncheon at the high school, and also that Kelly and I had the pleasure of attending. I'm not going to steal her thunder. Then you want me to hold my peace?
No, go ahead.
We attended the Guilderland Cafe at Guilderland Elementary School, and it was absolutely adorable. There was a show and a meal, and the students dressed up as chefs and servers, and there was even a very sassy hostess, and it was just a fantastic event. And I believe they raised $1,000 for the local food pantry, which is unbelievable. And then also I'd just like to give a shout out to our amazing music department and the Music and Friends group of parents that helped support that. They put on NISMA this weekend, which there was so much talent there, and it went on for 2 days, and it takes a lot of work to pull something like that off. So, thank you.
Great. Blanca definitely stole my thunder. But Guilderland Cafe was so much fun, and thank you so much for the invite. It was great. Can't wait till my son's a second grader next year. Hopefully he gets to do it. Any other comments? Go
I
ahead.
forgot one thing, that this was kind of a big thing too. They had the District Orchestra Festival on the 17th with Dr. Levi, who came in. It was amazing. So just all the different groups, like from the middle school, the high school, and then they all combined together. It was so beautiful. They did a tremendous job. So it was great.
Okay. That's the end of my list. We have a motion to adjourn. We got Kim and Blanca. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned.
Hey.
Second time I guess to use it.
Nice job, Tony.